audio issues, so.
Welcome to the TForce LCS Rundown. This is Mott Ganorum, your host, joined this week, as always, with Optimus Tom.
That's me. Glad to be back.
And sitting in for Wrecker N this week, we have pwnophobia, host of the Trinity Force podcast.
Oh, don't talk me up, you silly little goose.
It's like having Dad in the podcast.
Dad's just like, God damn it, I'm going to take over the stream, and I'm going to host the podcast, and I'm going to show you young whippersnappers how to get this done.
He literally told us when we had technical difficulties that he was pulling this podcast over, and that he was going to turn around and host it, and he did.
That's right. So, yeah, guys, Wrecker's obviously not here. I'm here because Wrecker is sick. He had a little bit of he said bronchitis or whatever going on last week. He could hardly talk, so.
Case of a death, it sounded like.
So we'll give him a night to rest and recoup his voice. So let's start off with some podcast news. What's going on this week for you guys? Optimus Tom.
There was a lot of League of Legends going on this week in pretty much every single region. So, of course, we had the EU and the NALCS taking place on the normal days, but as our friends in Korea, Monte Cristo, and Doha had to endure about 20 hours of casting, there was a lot of Korean OGN, both the OGN qualifiers and the Masters series from SK Telecom going on. LPL started up. GPL, which I can watch now because it's on the LOL esports site, and I remember when it's on now. That's been kind of going into full swing. So this is literally like the middle of football season when like football and college football are on at the same time. Only there's like 16 other college football leagues. So I've done nothing but watch League of Legends. I haven't even played, which is
Oh, that's awful.
No Hexakill for you?
All right, okay. I have become the Lord of the Hexakill, though. I'm not going to lie.
I haven't even played it yet. I've actually been playing on my Smurf account, Booth Sam, and just playing Jungle Shaco and terrorizing everybody, which it's like the worst way to play because you get used to being able to dominate, but otherwise it's kind of cheap.
Speaking of will dominate, Curse sucks. There we go. That's pwnophobia for
yeah! Woo! I'm all for that. And how are you, Adam? How has your week been?
I do a lot of administrative work in the background. Like, everyone's like, oh, we got 4 hours of podcast a week. I'm like, yeah, I've got like 20 hours of podcast work to do a week. What's playing this game? But everything's been good. I watched quite a bit of the LCS this weekend. I watched Monte Cristo and Doha cast their 10 games. I think it was 10 games yesterday or whatever. They cast on a lot.
One day.
So, right. I watched a few of those games. Yeah, I've been trying to keep up with the best I can.
Well, we'll be able to enjoy you tomorrow night on the Trinity Force podcast starting at 8 p.m. Eastern. Same Twitch channel, not the same Twitch time, 1 hour earlier.
1 hour earlier, that's right.
1 hour and 7 minutes earlier, this one particularly. And of course, do not forget our Australian friends, brothers, if you will, over at the Oz LOL podcast, which airs on Thursday. And of course, do not forget to find us on iTunes and Stitcher. Like us, rate us, tell me how awesome my bow ties and Pee Wee Herman-esque they are. We absolutely love it. Question, do we have a feedback, or is it still just feedback at trinityforcepodcast.com?
There is LCS at trinityforcepodcast.com.
Blow it up.
There you go.
Blow it up.
If you guys want to talk about anything LCS related, I think that's the email to go to.
Absolutely.
Or if you guys want to suggest a secret word so we could all scream when Tom says it. Other than that.
And by that you mean you, because I am Mott Ganorum and not Tom. Yes. I don't know who this Tom is that you speak of.
I'm still going to get used to that other time.
Well, let's get right into the LCS news for this week. Optimus Tom, I'm going to actually let you take away what's been going on in China this week before we hit NA and EU, because I feel like there's going to be a lot of emotion going around this week.
Oh, man. So
take it away.
So China has had a lot of roster changes, and a lot of that is going to be based off the fact that a new team who are called Edward Gaming, no relation to the support player for Team Gambit Gaming, but Edward Gaming has acquired a slot that was left by LMQ, who are now a Challenger North American team. You might have seen them most recently winning the Coach Series #1 after the LCS last weekend, but they left, and their spot was left open. And this new team, Edward Gaming, came in, and there's a lot of controversy surrounding the recruiter, the coach, the analyst, everybody who's kind of quote unquote taking top players from other teams. But basically, they've come together with a roster with former members from World Elite. They took some members from OMG. Like a lot of the Chinese teams kind of came together, and much like the European Alliance, they've formed together this super team for China. And this, of course, has left a lot of roster swaps throughout the rest of the Chinese scene. World Elite has had to pick up new members. Conan, who was previously Love Cry Boy, changed his name, now joins. They lost Clear Love, or Troll, their jungler, and FZZF, who was their support player. They wound up going away. Young Glory, another Chinese team, they wound up getting 2 more members and switching some roles around in their team. OMG, more importantly, Koma and Imba have left the team, and Cool has gone to the bench. We're not exactly sure if he's going to be switching teams as well as of right this second, or if it's just something within OMG, but they've picked up more members and had more roster swaps of their own. So there's a lot of kind of roster instability in China. The one team that hasn't had anything happen was Invictus Gaming. And when the LPL started this week, we had Invictus going up against Edward Gaming, kind of the 2 giants going head-to-head against each other. And it was a pretty impressive showing for Edward Gaming in their first official game as a team. They kind of stomped IG hard.
And what's really exciting for me especially is that if you're not familiar with a lot of those teams and a lot of those names, especially since really the most major exposure we get on sites like LOL Esports is when we get to Worlds, is that league is now actually integrated into the site. So if you go onto the lolesports.com, check out all the different schedules that they have live, you can actually now see and watch those Chinese league teams there and gather all that information. So that's really big for me. It helps me keep track of everything and when those games are going on, and finds an easy way to go to get to them. So that's been awesome coming up.
You know what helps me keep track of it? This podcast, because I don't follow
there
any
you
of those things.
Well, that's why we have Optimus Tom, because he knows all that stuff. And I know OMG, World Elite, they were around last year at Worlds. One of the many teams that I just expect to destroy everybody from NA and EU. So great. Now I'll be able to see the death coming before it actually hits. So that'll be awesome. So let's break into NA news for this week. And I'm getting all smiles because I'm watching Adam and Tom get all psyched up. Let's talk about minor roster swaps and announcements.
Yes.
I'm just going to run through these really quick. So VVV Gaming Red Don't Mash Me leaves the team and gets picked up by Curse Academy, replacing Fabi, which was a huge surprise for me because I thought Fabi was just some solo queue god. Apparently he doesn't do that well when he's in the competitive scene. Dignitas announces that Ziggy will be their sub jungler. So that's really it for the minor announcements, but let's get into the meaty part. XTG benches Bloodwater, moves Zuna to support, sub Nick Wu to jungle. Begin.
Now, Adam, you could start on this one, and I'll kind of chime in with you, because I know you're itching to dig your claws into this.
I'm not really itching. I don't know if I should start, because if I start, I might not get off a Hornet soapbox, and this could be bad. So right now, I don't think that was the right move. I do think Bloodwater was the weak link out of XDG. However, I do not think that removing him at this point was the correct move for XDG, because the way I look at it, they're trying to band-aid the situation, kind of like Curse does, and we've seen how Curse does when they band-aid situations. They might win once or twice, but then suddenly they don't play to their maximum potential. They didn't give Zakent enough time in the LCS. They gave him 4 weeks, I think it was, to play, and then they moved him to coach. And then St. Vicious, I'm just going to say St. Vicious was like, get the fuck out of here, I'm coming in. Whether that's true or not, that's just how it feels, with St. Vicious's attitude and his performance. But when you start looking at this, Saturday, Reginald stepped in and started talking to the casters at the beginning of the LCS, and he started saying, if I would have found out one of my guys was retiring at the end of the 2013 season, I would have benched him, at the beginning of the season. I don't feel like that's the right attitude, because when you look at all these teams out there that are benching players or, that have good records and that are changing players, they're doing it very calculated. TSM, at the beginning, they've had exactly 3 roster changes. Dyrus was removed for the Rain Man. Wild Turtle replaced Chaos because Chaos, again, had inner turmoil between the team. We saw the video where he wasn't showing up on time. He was out partying, whatever it may be. So they needed to find a more, a more reliable AD carry. And now Burgeon has come in, or Burger King has come in because Reginald stepped down because he had too much on his plate. So those are 3 very calculated roster changes. Fnatic, for example, is pretty much the same team since beginning of Season 1, save for a couple roster changes. They brought Reckles in, or Reckless in eventually. Yellow Star had stepped into place until Reckles was, of age. And as soon as they kept Yellow Star on the team and just moved him on, and they benched their interim guy who was playing with him. I can't remember his name.
Push you.
Thank you, Push you. But he did fantastic against the Worlds. Now you go to XDG, who was a top team coming out of the World Finals last year, and now they're coming to Season 3. Now people can argue that Season 3 was the reason this team isn't doing very well, but when you look at professional sports teams, for example, who benches a player in the middle of the season when they were on a winning team last year?
The New England Patriots.
But they're Tom Brady winning a Super Bowl and then saying he's going to retire in 2013. Let's just give me my example here. Tom Brady wins the Super Bowl in 2012. He says at the end of 2013, I'm going to retire. I'm just throwing this out there for an example. They're not going to bench him at the beginning of 2013 because he says he's going to retire then at the end. They're going to let him play out and show because he did really well in that 2012 season. Same thing should go with XDG. And so many people are dogpiling on Zuna, saying Zuna is the issue, Zuna is the problem, and I don't think that is the issue. Yes, Bloodwater more than likely is, the reason the team is losing, but they shouldn't just kick him out of there because he's retiring so quickly. Yes, I'm retiring at the end of the season. Why not continue to play with the team and continue to learn the team? And especially in an esport where there's splits and it's so quick, esports move so much more quickly than professional teams. That why are you kicking people off and not giving people time to learn? I think they can make it out of the qualifiers, beat LMQ or whatever it may be coming in. Give this team time to learn each other. I just don't feel it's right kicking Bloodwater off the team so quickly.
Well, the concept of even saying that he was going to retire at the end of the year, that he's not retired. I mean, he had an AMA on Reddit where he sort of debunked that. He's taking a look at his other options in life in general and just seeing where the LCS can fall into it. And I want to bring up a conversation towards the end of the podcast where we really talk about the concept of retirement and what it really means to be an LCS player right now and what does retired actually mean. But Tom, you said that you wanted to have an extra point in there.
Well, first off, if we're going to be mentioning anything about retirement and going to a sports analogy, I don't think we should because Brett Favre, and I blame him for all of this. And I was going to say, if they bench Tom Brady for winning a Super Bowl and then wanting to retire next year, he could always get signed by the New York Jets. But that's another argument for another sport and another different kind of podcast. But aside from this, I'm going to have to kind of side with a lot of the players on this one. And the reasoning behind it is a lot of what XDG's problems are stemming from isn't necessarily the fact that so I want to kind of go back to what I mentioned on the previous podcast. XDG had this role swap where they took their AD carry and moved him to the jungle, and they took their jungler, who is regarded as one of the best in North America, and put up pretty good results against a lot of the teams on the World's group stage, put him in AD carry. Mm-hmm. And while that may not have been the optimal situation due to champion pools or mechanical skill or whatever it may be, shot calling, team cohesion, both those players put up pretty good results on their individually strong champions. And I mean, we saw like Smithy go like 8-0 and 9 like a week or two ago on Sivir. When you give Zuna Olaf, he goes berserk, like literally on that champion. He's a berserker. It's what he does. But when you give them something that they're comfortable on, they perform extremely well.
Also, which hosted Nintendo this year.
Kind of piggybacking off what Pone said there, it's not a fact that these players are performing poorly. Some of the games they may not be performing up to the caliber of the LCS players that people come to expect. But It's the fact that they haven't had time. This roster swap for XDG, most recently the one with Azuna and Smithy, came in after the Battle of the Atlantic. LCS started less than a month after that. So this team made that decision to switch roster roles without having practiced during the offseason very heavily as a team, and then moved into week number 1, and they won one of their games in week 1, having this roster that had less than a month practice going up against TSM, Cloud9, Dignitas, CLG, who may have had roster problems of their own, Curse, Coast, everybody who practiced with that roster. The only other team that you can really compare XDG to right now is Evil Geniuses, because they have had maybe a little bit more, if not the same amount of time practicing that XDG does, but Evil Geniuses gets off so less harsh. They have their own criticisms, don't get me wrong, but in the eyes of the community, they get off so less harsh because of the individual players' popularity, I'm going to say, rather than their performance in the LCS. And all of these players, if you give them a champion that they feel comfortable on right now, if you give them the communication properly, they perform extremely well. We just saw this past week, Evil Geniuses demolishing Dignitas. We saw XDG being able to come back against Dignitas when they made a bad Baron call. They're able to rebound and use that to accelerate to victory. These
just
are
a point on those two games. I'm going to put a theory out there. I think Dignitas is really bad.
I don't think that's a theory. I think Dignitas is... I think it's actually... I don't think Dignitas is bad. The individual players are good. And don't get me started on Skara, because I will piss off like all your viewers when I start talking about Skara, because I don't believe he should be an LCS player, but that's not part of this discussion. But I think it's the shot calling of Dignitas that is losing these games. How many Barons have they called for in the last couple of weeks that have lost in the games? You just mentioned one with EG, for example. But when you start talking about EG, Optimus Tom, that Snoopy, Yellow Pete, and Crepo, they're running on their names. People love those players. Snoopy is, he's got the girls' fans, the hearts of all those because he's got the awesome stare. Crepo is a fantastic streamer, and Yellow Pete has just been with the team forever. And when you look at that three-person synergy, you should think Jungle and Duo Bot should be able to carry a game. And you've got Pole Belter sitting in the mid, another fantastic player. And then you just kind of have Inox, who's just kind of doing his thing in the top lane and not really synergizing with the team, although we saw him on, Yasuo today making silly plays. But I feel like everybody on that EG team is trying to make plays on their own, while XDG is trying to make plays together. They're just not the right calls. And I don't know why XDG isn't making the right calls, because before they had, on the Trinity Force podcast, we had Gnome Saiyan on a few episodes ago, and she said they didn't have a dedicated shot caller. And that was one of the reasons they moved Zuna to the jungle, is because they wanted somebody who was vocal. They wanted somebody who could make the shot, calls correctly. But taking the jungler out and moving him to AD carry and putting Zuna there, I don't think was the right call. I think somebody just needed to step up and man up and started, being louder than Zuna. And I didn't mean to interrupt, but going off of that point right there, Zuna was so focused in these games. Like I've been able to communicate with Zuna. I've talked to him outside of the game, and Reddit said this, people have gone out there and said, he's a really nice guy. He sounds loud and he looks like a mean dude, but he's like a big teddy bear. The thing is, when you switch him into that role and he has less than a month to prepare, he's not going to be making those shot calls until he's comfortable enough in the position. Not having him adjust to that position and giving him the proper comfort levels while the rest of the team is having problems in their own solo lanes or their duo lanes is putting immense pressure on him. First off, he's going to be team captain. He's in charge. He's making the shot calls. He's in a new role. And let's face it, the guy who carried them all of last season, Mandatory Cloud, is not performing. His champion pool has gotten a little wacky. People have said he hasn't adapted to Season 4 very well. This is the guy that could play anything in Season 3. He was one of the first in NA to play Lissandra and do extremely well on it. They had that AoE team fight synergy that's just gone. He's dying in lane. He went from most kills to least kills. I think there was a statistic that they dropped on the stream a couple weeks ago where it was in his first 7 games, he had 50 kills last season. 50 kills in 7 games. He had crazy. 13 in this first 7 games. So it's not just a one-person issue. And I'm going to kind of trying to transition the conversation a little bit, because a lot of this falls on the preparation from the team
which goes into a behind the scenes aspect that a lot of people hit upon in Reddit.
Yeah, you're right. We've talked again. I'm going to go back to the no saying thing. They were talking about, no saying got moved back to like sub manager or whatever it was, and I can't remember the manager's name off the top of my head. I know Tom is taking a drink. He knows.
Like their coach?
Yeah, the coach manager.
Kenma.
There you go. And him moving in at the end of the season, to take over. Going back to, let's talk about CLG for a second here. CLG picked up Monte Cristo, and eventually it clicked with all of them. They said, we understand Monty's finally telling us what to do, and while he's giving us as much advice as he can, are we listening to it? Beginning of season, no. And I think Monty has had a huge impact on CLG. Finally, it clicked with the team, but it takes the team to have a good coach and to listen to that coach. Now, I don't know what's going to be on the scenes. Is the team listening to Kenma and saying, no, we don't like your calls, so we're going to play the way we are? And is Kenma making bad calls, or is Kenma making really good calls and the team not listening? I don't know what's going on, and I'll leave that up to speculation between Reddit and everybody else. But my point stands. I agree with you. You need a good coach, and you need a team willing to listen and willing to put egos aside to do better at the game. And I think EG needs that right now, and XDG needs that right now. They need to put everything aside.
To go back to the sports analogies really quickly, that's where esports has come. I mean, you have how many coaches and personnel on a football team? And there's 16 games, and it's done in one season, like between the months of September and December. And then if you don't make the playoffs, that's done until the next year at spring training and everything. But you have how many personnel on that staff to prep the players and individually. In esports, when it's that much faster paced, when you play 2 to 3 games, sometimes even 4 games in super weeks every single week, and your season is in a 2.5 month period or something along those lines, you need to be able to adapt and move that much quicker. Teams like SK Gaming, Candy Panda, when they interviewed him after a victory, they have a sports psychologist to keep their head in the game. And I mean, not every single name is going to have that. The SKs, the Fanatics, the big old esports kind of hierarchies that have been around for a very long time, they can provide that. But if a team is going to be struggling, a team that made it to Worlds and has the resources to be good, there's something that has to click there. And whether it be the players, whether it be behind the scenes, that's what we don't know.
Now, I have to ask you a question. So with that in mind, does this have to do with the age of people that are in esports? Most people are between 17 and 22 years old, I would say, that are playing professionally right now. We've screamed about players not having contracts, no player unions, no players understanding how business works and all of that. How much of this has to do with how young the player base is and how people don't want to accept responsibility for their actions? You know what I'm saying? Like, if they actually, if a team like XCG had 4 or 5 people telling them what to do, each had an individual coach, how many of those players, being as young as they are, would actually listen to those people?
Well, I think what you get into is the people who actually will take the time and operate within the model that's going forward, where you have the support staff. Those are the people who are actually going to stick around. I mean, look at Skara's performance compared to how long he's been with Dignitas and how long he's been in the scene. When you look at the lifespan of some other teams and some other players, his is superior. And why? I think he has the right kind of personality and the right kind of dedication to operate within the space. Yet you see other players who are dropping out all the time and retiring or moving away from esports or taking time for school. And
do we want to talk about what retiring is? I know you've been itching to talk about that.
I wanted to talk about that since the last time. I think right now the way this whole esports model works out is not very sustainable for these players. They have a lot of pressure coming from outside sponsors to keep streaming, to keep their star power up, being a presence online. And then you have obviously the pressure from Riot with this consistent schedule. Super weeks. It's an incredibly taxing. I mean, look at, and we're going to talk about this game in a bit, but look at the reaction of Coast after they beat TSM. They lost their minds. And it's because it's a tremendous amount of pressure. And I think because of the nature of video games as a sport, and I definitely do consider League of Legends a sport, It's more mentally taxing than it is physically taxing. So there's an expectation that you can sit in front of the computer for 12 hours a day and play and practice and work and analyze. And I think at the end of the day, that almost leaves you more drained. So you get these people, kids, really, people who are much younger than me, who are going out there and hitting this brick wall of a mental state where they have to take a step back and say, whoa, here I am at the age of 18 in a career. How much time do I want to dedicate to this versus something that's going to work for me in 5 years, 10 years? I mean, in your opinion, and Optimus Sam, I think you're probably better equipped than anybody to answer this question. What do you think the lifespan of a LCS player today really is?
It's such a intertwined question, but I guess like the too long didn't read statement is their lifespan is directly correlated to how well they work with the team that they wind up being recruited for. Like, for example, Evil Geniuses is a huge brand, which offers their players, even in their StarCraft division, their fighting game division, so many more opportunities outside of being a player if they stay loyal to the team, if they perform well enough, and if they develop a relationship, which is something you don't necessarily find in every single other job outside of esports or outside of sports in general. But it does present itself every now and then. But the problem is, too, the other side of it is your direct correlation to your longevity on a team is compared by how well you perform and how your perception is in the community with all the viewers, all the fans, all the supporters of whatever team that you're potentially going to be representing. So as we've seen, some players like the Scaras, like, Reginald up until his retirement, like Dyrus, for example. These players have been playing since season 1, and they're going on their 3rd, 4th year of being a professional player, a competitive player. Some of these other players that have dedicated themselves to the game as an esport, like the Chaoxes, like the Rainmans, that were in season 2, they're not around anymore. They're streamers and they can live off of their own personality. But if you don't develop that, if you are,
can they live off it? Because we're seeing like the Rain Man, he's only getting, I think he gets 1,200 viewers now, if that. He used to get 25,000 viewers when he was doing it. So how do you keep yourself relative? And I still think that comes back to age. I still think it comes back to understanding how to run a business. When I was 22 years old, I had no idea how to run a business. Listen, guys, I'm 28 years old, and it took me that long and talking with people who know how to do it to start running this thing. Like, I'm talking like the LCS Rundown. Like, when I was 22, there was no way in hell I could get these 3 guys together a week to do this, because I didn't understand logistics and all that. Now, when you got these guys actually making money, they're making, 12-5 a split, and people that have to play a game and be dedicated, I could hardly make it to work on time when I was 22 years old at 8 o'clock in the morning, let alone play a game for 8 hours a day, I still think this comes down to a lot to age and comes down to maturity. I don't think these guys have it.
A really good addition to that.
Some of them do, but you know what I'm saying.
At this point, it's a bit of an older topic, but who was it that came out and said that he's not going to stream as much anymore because people were being mean?
Wicked.
Okay, Wicked. So I support people who stream, people, LCS players who want to take the time, the extra time outside of their LCS work to be members in the community. But to go on and say that you don't want to stream as much because people are being mean or rude, you make a lot of money doing that. And you have sponsors who are out there and supporting you to do that. And I understand there's a lot that you get out of it, but that's a major consideration. And if you're fine with not making the money, if you don't want to stream as much and not make as much money, go for it, man. The internet's
okay, excuse my language, grow some fucking skin, okay? If you are worried about criticism, you are not meant to be in esports, you're not meant to be in sports, you're not meant to be in the public's eye. If you cannot take criticism, you should not be out there with your voice being heard. You should not be streaming because the internet is full of trolls. The internet is totally anonymous. The loudest people, the people who are going to complain. That's why Reddit is so popular. That's why people are screaming about Zuna and Bloodwater and everything else we've talked about. If you can't take that, don't do it. I get it. Wicked. It's hard, dude. I've streamed and people have, made fun of me, but I continue to stream because it could potentially make me money, or it has made me money, and I have, thick skin, and I'll dish it right back out. So if you're out there and you don't think you can take it, don't try to make a career out of video games or the internet.
I'm going to have to tack on a little bit to this because I can kind of feel both sides of the argument, not necessarily having been a player, but having been a caster on like the MLG stage and stuff like that. When I started casting, there were two things that really worked against me to this day that still work against me, which is why there's the little close tab button on Twitch chat every now and then. But there's always been the debate of this guy sounds like he's 12, and why is this guy not narrating a pie eating contest? He looks like he'd know more about that. So there's always the
Sorry,
criticism.
Joe Miller. Anyway,
the criticism that comes in from that, because when you're first starting out and when you are younger, and well, yeah, right there.
Yeah, right. Look at the pie eat.
Machinorum ate all the pies.
Machinorum loves him some cherry and rhubarb pie.
My doctor says I'm almost obese.
Almost, but not.
I'm
but
beautiful.
You're not.
Yeah.
There you go.
The beard helps a lot cut the...
The hair kind of ruins
Totally
it, though.
does.
Oh, yeah.
As a multiple chinned, very chubby cheek person as well, the facial hair is definitely disguised that a little bit on myself. But kind of just piling on top of that, the criticism is out there, and people will, if they, for some reason, you are not the normal, if you are not their favorite, if you are not what they're used to, or if you're just, maybe you're not as good. There's also that possibility there. People will find reasons to say things like that. They will find reasons to bring you down. And while you are kind of forced to interact with the community, or not forced, but you probably should, because the community helps you out a lot and you are there to help like entertain them and take feedback from them. But like, you also need to take everything with a grain of salt. To some extent, for someone who is younger, constantly seeing all this criticism, going back to the Bjergsen feature that they did on him, where he was saying that when he was in school, he was bullied because he was a little frail, nerdy white kid who was really good at League of Legends. Like, when you are in that mindset still, and they put you on a stage in front of 300,000 live stream viewers, hundreds of people in a environment in that area, if you are getting nothing but hate because your team is not performing, not only are you facing down the fact that, like, for example, with Azuna, you're facing down the fact that my team was at Worlds and now we're playing like poop. Mm-hmm. And then on top of that, everybody is saying, your brother isn't a good coach. You are not a good player. By the way, lose some weight. Like, having all that thrown at you is extremely, extremely harsh. And for these guys that are in their early 20s, maybe not even 20 years old yet, to hear something like that, they're still in that school kid kind of mindset. Like, that's the kind of stuff that you hear about, like a 16-year-old kid getting bullied in high school, and drastic things sometimes come of that. It even goes into college years. It's just this all over again. And I don't think it's an esports unique problem. It's just, well, it's a humanity unique problem. That's an entirely different conversation.
The optimist in me wants to say that they shouldn't have to be subjected to that. This shouldn't be a problem. But this
kids
is
at high school shouldn't be subjected to getting teased and everything. But
unfortunately, this is the way. Right, this is the way it is, and I think we've beaten that subject to death. We're very quickly running out of time. I want to move on.
We have 27 minutes according to my clock,
and we have two individual divisions of esports to cover. So I want to sprint through EU. So I'm going to give you the rundown of the games. Copenhagen Wolves over Millennium, Rocket over Gambit, Super Hot Crew over Fnatic, Alliance over SK, Copenhagen Wolves over Fnatic, Gambit Gaming over Super Hot Crew, SK over Rocket.
Gambit who? You mean Gambit in pajamas?
Edward's Slumber Party?
Edward's.
I'm going off the documents. Thanks, Dom.
So
look like a fool. And Millennium over Alliance.
So there's three main storylines that hit on here, and Adam already mentioned one. Gambit Gaming lose against Roccat, a dominating team in the European LCS, with a roster full of substitutes, most of them from Ninjas in Pajamas, one of them from Solo Q, and one of them being good old Eddie. Then they bounce back and beat the team that's threatening to tie them for second place, convincingly, with said same roster full of substitutes, which is a ridiculously impressive feat in and of itself. I got to give nothing but credit to Edward for this one. In an interview prior to that matchup, when he was sitting there with one of the Super Hot Crew players, Mixa, the support, Shox asked him, what do you feel like when people say that you're not performing like you were in Spring Season 3, that your NA time gave you a little bit of lax, that you're not competing with the best supports? And when he's standing next to one of the supports with the most deaths, but very high kill participation, he sits there and says, I am not performing well and I need to change something. So what happens? In the game, that same support with the most deaths kills him for first blood, and then he lands 3 clutch hooks for 3 kills back to back to back, and this team snowballs off of it. Like, immensely impressive. And then the interview afterwards, he goes, it doesn't matter if I die first, if they die more.
Thank you. I think more support players and more people need to recognize it, especially support players. And I'm going to, this is like a little solo queue rant, is like, if you are making plays and the team is coming out ahead, it doesn't matter if you're 0, 20, and 45. You are setting your team up for victory, and more players need to understand that. Stop looking at stats without looking at the big picture of what is going on.
Yeah, but just another point in there, playing on my Smurf account, Worth, what did we say on the Trinity Force podcast?
Worth is an anagram for throw.
Yeah. Make smart plays.
No, here's my question for Tom.
Oh, it really is. I never knew that.
Yeah, worth is an anagram for throw.
Yeah, right? Exactly. That's the best thing ever.
Optimus Tom. Let's talk about Gambit for a second here. Gambit went 1-1 this week, right? Did I get that right?
Yep.
Before that, last week they went 0-2, I believe.
I believe it was still a 1-1 week for them.
Okay.
They lost their last game to, I want to say it was SK.
Yeah, but they did like Warwick top, Evelyn jungle. They did some like crazy team comp, right?
That was their Skarner game.
That's it. That's what it was.
Pre-rework Skarner in the jungle.
That's what it was. Okay, now with Gambit, not Gambit, but Gambit. Do you feel like they disrespect everybody too much? They feel like they're still coming off their Season 2 prowess. They're still coming off Worlds, and that they feel like they can play anything, and that they can, they can get away with whatever they want to play because they are better players. Because that's how I feel when they start picking Kennen and Amumu support, and they let, Alex pick whatever he wants. And I like Warwick top, don't get me wrong, but I feel like Warwick Skarner is not a good combination to put together against the team that SK was running with like Pantheon jungle.
Yeah, so Gambit has 2 modes. There's the mode where they say that because of travel time they can't practice as much and they beat everybody, and then there's the mode where they go into a matchup visibly confident and they wind up losing. Now this is something that Quickshot brought up on the EU LCS broadcast, where in Spring Split Season 3 Gambit was 0-4 against Giants Gaming. Now, if you don't know who Giants Gaming is, it's because they're no longer a team and they're out of the LCS, which means that they weren't that great. But Gambit lost every single game to them, and their AD carry mained AD carry Kennen. So when Gambit Gaming, the team that made it to quarterfinals at Worlds this season, who made it to they made it to the semifinals at Worlds in Season 2. When you have that team losing to AD carry Kennen, losing to these teams that they should beat, you don't necessarily know if they're assigning blame to preparing too much for the bigger match that week, like against Roccat, or if it's just that they go into the match with the mindset of we're good enough to win this on our own, and then they kind of fall apart. It seems like it's going towards the latter in this case, because that game, Warwick top, Skarner jungle, Alistar support, and this is the first Skarner jungle that Diamond Prox has played, the first Alistar support, if memory serves correct, that Edward played. And then there's Warwick top, which worked very well with Teleport going down to the bottom lane when they had a normal team composition, but not necessarily in that case. So I got to say, Gambit, when they get to the top of the table, they feel like they are able to beat people, and they really prepare for the matches that will try them, like Roccat, like Fnatic, like the top tier teams. But when it comes to SK or Copenhagen Wolves or Alliance, they might stumble a little bit.
I think this is a really good transition to a very similar circumstance that happened in the NA LCS this week. So I'm going to go through those really quick. So we had EG over Dignitas, Cloud9 over Curse, thank God. Counter Logic Gaming.
Don't insert your own opinion in this at all.
No, that's not why we do this podcast. CLG versus XGG, Cloud9 over EG, Team Solomon over Curse. Boom, boom. Counter Logic Gaming over Team Coasts, Dignitas over XTG, and Team Coast over TSM.
That all rolls down to that level 1, though.
I'm going to start this off, and I took notes. I'm a huge TSM.
Oh my God, he's pulling out. He actually has paper. What is this?
This is my girlfriend's notebook, so it's all pink and
cute. That's the cutest thing I've ever seen in my entire life.
But I couldn't find a notepad, and I went to go see. I very rarely get the opportunity to watch these games live, which kind of sucks because you miss a lot of the pre and kind of post game analysis. But I've been paying a little bit more attention to that. But I saw that Team Coast beat TSM, and I thought, what's going on here? Something's there.
I like confident Tom. Continue, please.
This is TSM being, and this is Adam. I didn't know that you didn't know that this is an explicit podcast, but this is where TSM becomes a piece of shit.
Oh, I have to change the podcast to be explicit after I said fuck earlier, and now we got this going on.
So, I listened to in a today's pre-games. I don't know what league calls it, but it's like the pre-game.
The 20 minutes they don't tell you about, but they say the stream starts at 3 o'clock, but doesn't start till 3:30.
Right, but no, and they separate that out in the replays. So they had Dyrus on, and Dyrus was explaining, the failure of the game that was TSM versus Coast, and basically said, oh, well, I would have picked somebody different, but it wasn't our picks. Yeah, you're just making excuses for a problem. Maybe you don't even understand. So TSM comes into this game, and I'm just going to read my notes as I go down here. So Dyrus, early aggression, no wards. Late invade with no vision. There was a death there. First blood goes to Coast. After that, a stupid aggressive steal. Even trade in bot that was under Coast's tower. There are just point
even
after
trade
point.
As in both supports live or both AD carries live?
I think both AD carry. I think it was AD carry. They both got a kill in the bottom.
Because my definition of an even trade is both of the either the same type of champion live, either both support or both carry. That's why I'm asking.
I think it was both. I think it. You know what? I don't know, so I'm not going to put.
You're fine.
I think it was 80 carry on support in both cases.
Yeah.
Okay.
Basically,
continue. I'm just curious.
Throughout the whole game, TSM placed next to 0 wards. They made a ton of super stupid decisions to go in aggressively because they obviously went into this game incredibly confident. Dyrus did terrible. He picked what champion did he have? Did you guys watch that game?
Was that Dr. Mundo?
I think it was Mundo.
No, it wasn't Mundo.
Was it no Pantheon Trundle?
Oh,
that's right. No, he had
okay.
Trundle, and he was matched up against
Shyvana.
Shyvana. That's it. I'm just burping because of this.
Shyvana Vi. It was Shyvana Vi.
Right. And there was just death after death after death because they were going in unprepared. They had 0 ward coverage. Just way too much confidence going in. Coast did well. Coast, the first couple of kills that Coast got, boosted their confidence significantly. They went super hardcore, pinned TSM into their base, and then it got to the point where that stopped. This is where Coast's shittiness really kicked in. I don't particularly like Coast. I've never been impressed by them, so if there are Coast fans out there, sorry.
Don't apologize. Don't apologize for your opinions.
This win means nothing. This was TSM losing a game. This wasn't Coast winning a game. And if you look at the last half of that game, the same exact fight happened about 4 times in the top lane. Turret down, inhibitor exposed, Coast pushes in, TSM man drops to start the game with Pantheon. Even amount of kills go out, Coast has to push back. That happened over and over and over again until TSM was even strength. Again, TSM makes a fundamental, overconfident move, goes for Baron, loses the fight, Coast wins the game. And TSM throughout that game, they made good plays. They had a fantastic. The first dragon that went down, they had a fantastic kill. They absolutely dominated that team fight. But the rest of the game, they were just shit. They were overconfident. They didn't take the time to ward, and they weren't playing carefully. They weren't playing like they were playing Cloud9. They were playing like they were playing Coast, and Coast destroyed them for it. Of course, Coast goes on to lose later on that week to CLG, which kind of sucks now anyway. So
CLG sway. Did you just say CLG sucks now?
I kind of think they do a little bit.
Gloves are coming the fuck off right now. The headphones are coming off. Let's talk about this.
Before we jump into the CLG point.
No, it's fine.
And I picked up a pen just so I could be on Mockindoram's level right here with our writing utensils and everything.
Wait, I don't have a pen. I have a bottle opener. Does that count?
Yes.
Here, you can have my other pen, which just so happens to be...
Here are my
buddy.
notes for that game.
All right. So, two very good points that you bring up. The first one I'm going to tackle, Dyrus being aggressive without any wards. You know who else capitalized on Dyrus's aggression with 0 wards? It was OMG and SK Telecom T1K in Season 3 Worlds during the group stage. Every single kill on Dyrus top lane. Dyrus, where's your ward? Why are you at the enemy's tower with no wards? Guess what? The jungler is back by your tower. You're dead. What do they do in Season 4? They give you this little trinket thing that puts a ward down, so you don't have to buy any.
That's free, actually.
And it still happens. So this is just sloppy play coming out from TSM. The overconfidence was there. In the interview with Dyrus this earlier today, or early on Sunday for the LCS, when he was talking about Quas and Freak and Kobe, he said that during Champion Select, they came in thinking they were going to win, or something along those lines, just paraphrasing. And in Champion Select, they picked something that they had not practiced and said, well, we can try this game. Guess what? It didn't work.
No. That's totally invalid. If you actually wanted to try something new, why don't you actually do the prep work that makes you win the game normally? Put wards, not get caught out at their tower.
No, see,
and
I see what you're trying to say here.
Die on the way back.
But weren't the casters before that game started, TSM versus Ghost, saying that TSM has only played 28 champions total? And for the most part, they played the same 15 champions. So why was this game? I agree with you, Montnagorum. Whatever. I can't say your fucking name. I agree with you. Like, they should be doing the fundamentals, and I think they can win with the fundamentals. But if they're playing the same champions all the time, and maybe they switch 1 or 2 up, if they're playing to their strengths of warding and all that, why aren't they winning games?
Well, this game specifically, was chalked up to the fact that they overlooked those fundamentals because they went into this game confident. They went into this game thinking that they're going to win, and that they have that mentality that Gambit Gaming in the EU LCS has. We can pick whatever we want because this game should be won. And instead of harboring down on the fundamentals of, all right, this is what we do, this is how we do it, we're just doing it with different champions, let's practice this, let's go for it, they decided to try something risky and figured that, well, we'll still be able to come back and we can just win this after the laning phase. And while we saw what happened in the laning phase, they didn't really win it.
Right, I don't buy it, because when it came down to brass tacks, when it came down to the actual executions of what makes TSM good, that first dragon fight, that was ridiculous. They went in despite having pretty shitty success thus far and absolutely dominated it. They had a great fight. The entire time that they were sitting in their base, Coast really didn't have much to stand on. They were losing. The game was very quickly slipping into TSM's favor, and even the casters were bringing that out. It's not like these were close matchups. This was Coast absolutely failing. They went in the same route 4 times. Mm-hmm. Even in solo queue, people will say, well, maybe we shouldn't do that anymore. It was just ridiculous. But then TSM says, oh, wow, no, we're great. We're beating them everywhere. Let's just go take Baron. Dead. And the game's over.
Oh, so you're like Dignitas at this point. We're like, hey, let's call Baron, because obviously we're a better team than the enemy, so we're going to win no matter what.
So this is something that's plagued Coast since they were Monomaniac way back at IPL 4, where their decision-making has always been, we'll win this game in the first 20 minutes. Then they evolved into the, if we don't win in the first 20 minutes, Zion Spartan can split push and that'll be fine. Then they evolved into the, wow, our mid laner is really good. If Zion Spartan can't carry, then obviously he can. So they're slowly but surely realizing all of their strengths, and this is with the help of a very good analyst in the form of Alex Penn, who worked with a championship NA team last season. You may know them. Their name is Cloud9. This is him saying, listen, guys, you have all these tools. This is how you use them, but if you don't use them in-game, then I can't help you any further. He's said that before. Once he lets go of them, he's nervous the entire time because he gives them the tools, but if they push the same lane 4 times and have to wait for the team to throw the game back to them, he can't help them any further.
Monte Cristo, I'm pretty sure, has said the exact same thing, but in a different phrase, where he said, I've done as much as I could. I've watched as many VODs as I could from the Koreans. I've given them the tools, but if they don't use them... You know what? I work in tech support, okay? I'm going to give you this. I give people matches. I say, this is how you light a fire. You strike the match against the box, and you put it against the kindling, and it lights up. And they're like, no, I'm okay with rubbing my sticks together.
What part of the box you
Wait.
didn't specify?
Can you take the match out for me?
Yes, and that's what happens. And this is and I get it now. Like Optimus Tom, that was the perfect thing because now suddenly I understand like esports and all this. But like working in tech sports the same way, you give them the tools and they say, "No, I like doing it my way." Again, going back to age, going against immaturity, going against egos, all this stuff. People need to put all of that aside and listen to the analysts who have a overview third party, this is how you should play the game.
I want to defer to the chat room on Twitch for just a moment. I think to clear up a lot of confusion, instead of calling Optimus Tom, I really like Optimal Tim.
It's Optimal Dom. Okay, listen. Trinity Force podcast number 35, Optimal Dom came out. Optimal Tim, I don't give a fuck where that came from. It's Optimal Dom.
Sorry, bee's knees. Well, he's offering to hold your pen, so just saying. He missed.
That was dramatic effect.
Well, I mean, let's take a look at
what's our last
next
topic?
Week. Yeah, let's take a look at next week. We're running out of time very quickly here. Let's take a look at week 7 for EU. We have Alliance versus Fnatic, SK versus Super Hot Crew, Millennium on Gambit Gaming, Rocket over Super Hot Crew, Fnatic with Gambit Gaming, Copenhagen Wolves versus Millennium, Alliance on SK, and Super Hot Crew versus Rocket. Anything to pay attention to? Any specific games that you guys are going to be watching?
This week is full of specific games to watch, but if I had to highlight one that is going to be at the top of my list, it is game number 2 of day number 1, SK Gaming going up against Super Hot Crew. The teams that have gone 1-1, the teams that have gone 2-0, the teams that are all of a sudden pressing towards second place and in a deadlock tie with Fnatic for third place because this is Europe and Europe only works in tie scores. But the teams that were supposed to be at the bottom of the table that are tied at the top of the table, whoever wins this one has some leverage going into the head-to-head. Super Hot Crew, I believe, lost the last meeting against SK Gaming, so this is a chance to even it up. But literally, until the next day, this will decide third place.
Cool. And let's run through NA LCS really quick. We have XGG versus Cloud9, CLG on Curse, Dignitas versus TSM, Coast on Evil Geniuses, Cloud9 versus TSM, EG on Dignitas, XGG versus CLG, and Curse versus Team Coast. I'm going to say that the big game that you're going to want to watch this week is definitely Cloud9 versus TSM. TSM currently holds first place, but Cloud9 only needs one win to be pushed into that first place spot, so that's obviously going to be a pretty critical game. Now, I forget which specific player it was on Cloud9, but when asked when do you think you can pull ahead of TSM? When do you think the moment that you guys are going to step into number 1 is? They said they didn't know. They didn't even realize they had a game versus TSM. Wow. So hopefully this super embarrassing loss to Coast will snap them into attention, and them I mean TSM, and make them say, hey, Cloud9 is a big game. This is a big game. This is our first place position. we need to smarten up and take this game.
I really hope TSM plays to Bergen's. I hate this. I can never say Bjergsen. I feel
He's
like
a Viking.
I feel like they should play to his strengths and allow him to play what he's good at. Zed LeBlanc. Obviously, LeBlanc's gonna be banned. I mean, she's at like an 83% win rate now. She got a couple pings in NA this weekend where she lost, but allow him to play an assassin. Don't put him on Gragas. Put him on whatever he feels comfortable with.
I think he did really well given the circumstances.
Well, sure, he's doing great. He's a fantastic player, but I don't feel like they're playing to this awesome mid strength anymore. They're playing to the we're TSM, we're number one, we're going to win. And if they break that egotistical attitude and allow him to play what he wants and let Dyrus, and let Dyrus be Dyrus in the top lane and play to mid and bot, leave Dyrus alone, they're gonna beat Coast. The matchup to watch here is High and Burger King, in my opinion.
I really want to see this matchup because these two teams scrim each other extremely closely. They scrim each other every single week. They don't play each other, and they know each other's picks and secrets inside and out. So it's literally going to be the two best teams in North America slugging it out. And if someone tries to pull something out that the other team hasn't seen yet, it's either going to be a monumental Teemo success or it's going to be a crash and burn. So if someone pulls out tricks, it might not be as interesting of a game, but they stick to their guns. This is going to be a brawl.
I will be watching that game very closely, and I will be noting every single ward that TSM drops. And I will continue.
I wish I was in the podcast next week because now I want to do this, but I'm going to diligently watch the podcast next weekend and type in the chat and tell you how right or wrong you guys are. And I will be ignored.
Yes.
Most likely.
Will. Mostly because it's on a delay. As much as I like. Although I really like Optimal Tim. So we might keep that around.
I like shaggy long-haired hipster Tim.
I need to go get one of those very stylish Korean haircuts so I could be in a hardware commercial for some gaming company. You need to shave kind of like what I got going on, the short sides. You need the short sides and the long top. I do. I love this man to death, and I am not making fun of him, but I do not need a Matt Demers haircut. I do not need a Matt Demers. I'm sorry. I love my team. I love my animated GIFs, but I do not need the shaved sides. I had a discussion with him about that, and he said, "Yeah, I probably shouldn't shave those sides much anymore."
Just watch some Korean dramas and just pick up your haircuts from there.
Every Korean I've ever seen in my entire life has a little shorter sides but really long top, and it goes over their head. They're always like, it's in my face.
I would do my Loco Doco impression, but now is not the time nor place for that. So,
is that TForce LCS After Hours?
I'm pretty sure it's the After Hours edition. Yeah.
Well, speaking of After Hours, we are almost at our full hour here, given all of our technical issues. So thank you for joining us, the TForce LCS Rundown, as I still look at that title. This has been episode 2, and I have been Mott Ganorum, joining you each week for a discussion, joined, as always, by Optimal Tim.
Yeah, that's not going to stick around, Other Tom.
And this week in sub 4, and I'm fine being Other Tom, in sub 4 record and pwnophobia, Adam Cogswell.
Thanks. I hope you guys. I hope my commentary was on point with the LCS stuff, because I'm the first person to tell you I don't get to watch as much as you guys do, and that's why I'm not doing this podcast. So thanks for having me this week.
Awesome. Well, have a good night, everyone.
Peace.